Joining us now is Congressman Steve King. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Edie. I'm very glad to be with you.
Well, it's very interesting. Although repeated polls of Americans indicate there is growing opposition, and it's already a majority, opposition to this kind of bill that's been discussed, the president, Republican leaders, Democrat leaders, all saying they want to get it done. They want to push it through.
You know, I can't explain the president's motives on this, and each time I try, I get called with some questions I can't answer. But I can say, Edie, that this is an odd coalition that's been built together, and it's the cheap labor people on the one side of the equation. They're Democrats and Republicans, and it's the cheap votes on the other side of the equation, and they're mostly activist liberals. And then there's the Rovian theory that Republicans can recruit the Hispanics to become a solid core of the Republican Party. I just cannot make any of those equations work for me and still sustain, in my mind, American exceptionalism and the greatness that this nation has been and needs to become. We're sacrificing the rule of law on this altar for cheap votes and cheap labor.
Well, is part of the issue the inability to craft a bill that people could come to terms with the fact that there were so many sort of fringe groups that were part of the secret negotiations on it?
I'm told, and I get my information from some of the places you do, that La Raza and some of the very liberal activist Latino organizations were actively engaged in drafting the bill and in negotiating the bill. I do believe that. In fact, we have some of those elements on the House side as well. So that's a piece of it. But you know, meanwhile, the American people weighed in, and it was really a wonderful thing to see. The talk radio shows lit up, television lit up, and we had people that were on the phones. I asked them, go to your congressman's office, your senator's office, give them a personal experience. Let them know that this isn't just an email, but this is an emotional thing, that Americans will tenaciously hang on to the rule of law, and in the process of doing, they can defend the middle class.
Well, without even writing, I know that there were some who went home over the most recent break, and even at Republican functions, they were being booed on stages. But here's what's interesting. You know, if you talk about cheap labor, perhaps you can then understand the Commerce Secretary going out and trying to, you know, cajole people into voting for this. But you've also got Homeland Security Secretary Chertoff out there saying this is good legislation. We need it to keep America safe. It's hard to argue against him. You would assume he knows what he's talking about.
I would just take them all in one shot, Edie, and say this, that this is the president's agenda. He's tried to redefine amnesty into the terms of comprehensive immigration reform. The American people understand that phrase now to mean amnesty, but there isn't anybody in the administration that could come forward and say, in my head and in my heart, I flat out disagree with the president. Now, these people have to agree with the president. They all work for him, and they work at his pleasure. So when I have them before an immigration hearing, I know when I ask them questions, they can only give me the answers that they're approved to give, and that would include the secretaries and the directors of the main department heads you're talking about.